reconvene. And I think in light of Larry's presentation, what that was designed to do, I think, is to show us where we are currently. And you know, so wherever we go from there, it needs to improve. And I think that was the design of that presentation. To show us, here's the data, we have it, and we can do a lot of stuff with that. So I think the first question that we need to answer as a group, and I know we had a little discussion on the side over here about this, is what do we want from this process? What do we expect to get? You know, if we want one fractile time for the entire county, or if we want to break it down based on, you know, a tiered level of response for different areas. You know, I think that's a question we got to answer first before we can figure out, you know, what the data really tells us and what we want to get from it. So I'll open up the discussion on what do we want to get from this process. What are the feelings? Well, we can get anything we're willing to pay for when we got the money man here. So I think that's the conversation we just had over here. So what is the feelings of the group?
I'd like to hear suggestions from EMS as well as from the fire departments of how to process for improving that would benefit everyone. Is it available at the same cost, or isn't it? If it's not available, then that becomes part of Jeff's situation. But what is your EMS's solution, or maybe not solution, but suggestion for improvement, how to go about it, and then have the fire department chiefs have a response to what they feel like could be done, or if anything can be done.
Okay.
I think we need to look at it by the rural suburban. I think we need to approach it from that standpoint, because Jeff and I had a conversation about the human factor is as important as anything. And if you look at the volumes of calls, agreed the volumes of calls are more in the urban area. So if you use 90%, you know, 90% or 9% fractile, you can skew the remote locations dramatically if you don't separate them and look at them. And it is just as important to take care of that individual in jars in a timely fashion as it is to someone along 74. But I think even a lot of your 911 calls. I'm on a transportation committee, and I got a presentation the other day talking about vehicle accidents along the car. And a lot of them are rear enders. And a lot of times you transport them, but that critical accident out in the Jars community or New Salem or things like that historically have been more severe than you have along the corridor. So we have to take all that into consideration to make sure that we've got appropriate. I mean, you know, some of the charts I've seen shows that urban's pretty fast, and then the rural gets out into the 20 minutes plus. But you know, those individuals out in the rural area are just as important as along the urban, and we need to find ways to address that. And I understand funds are a concern, but like I told Jeff a while ago, if I'm going to get shot and thrown off the commission because I spent extra money to protect lives in rural Union County, sign me up for it. So we want to give EMS the tools, and I think that's our objective here, to do the best, very best that they can.
I do hear this out there from the Jars people, from New Salem people, the Olive Branch people. We pay the same tax rate that everybody else pays. We like to have the same service. Now, how we get to that, I don't have any idea. I'm not a EMS, but we have got to figure out a way to do that before we start figuring out the cost of it. I mean, I know that that's important, but
Yeah, and I think that's the question I'm asking is what do we want to get from this process? If it's one response time, 90% of the time over the entire county, then that's the way we need to let the data drive what our decisions.
Well, I think if we don't
If
start
get
with
down to
that,
that point and say we can or we cannot afford to do that, then we have to figure that out.
I think if we don't start with the idea that we can offer every citizen in Union County the same services, then we are backing up.
I agree. I agree.
I do too.
So,
And like I said, from the EMS side, if I'll comment, you know, we're a department, and like I said, our main mission is to serve the citizens. If they're ill, traumatized, and also transport. Also, we've been set and established that we have a certain amount of funding that we have to do. So you have to look at it our way. We have to go back and give you, or give the citizens, the most bang for the buck that we can offer. Is it the you know, the Taj Mahal of EMS services? No, it's not. Could we benefit more with additional funding? Yes, we can. But at certain funding levels that we've been receiving, and also with this the last agreement that was set forward, I think there was some quite a bit of additional funding present there to hopefully help the rural areas. I know we're still talking about Jackson and different ones like that, but really getting back to our budget, we have to provide the coverage with the money and the means that we have. As saying, if we have 11 trucks, we have to move those trucks around. Larry knows, a lot of times daily, we're out of trucks. And so what we have to do is we have to move those trucks around. And because of that situation, we have to attempt to predict where that next call is going to be. And that's why we move. You know, we do that prediction through data. And if the data says, you know, for the last 14 months, you've had 2 calls in this area, more than likely we're going to pull that truck. Is that necessarily fair to those taxpayers? No, it's not. But it's something that we have to do. So if we want to work to a solution that everybody has the same opportunity, we're more than open. But on our side, that's what we've been tasked to do. That's my job also now, you know. So, you know, if we've got additional.
and I think we understand that.
The committee, if the committee wants to say, you know, we want to, you know, these response times in this area, and I think that's the main driver we've got in the EMS, is response time.
Well, see, I think you need to take the budget portion out of it.
Okay, well, that's
For now.
Okay.
For now.
Yeah, for now, because I think.
But it's always been a part.
It always will be.
For the most people.
It's always been a part.
It'll always be a part, but
We won't take
I
that.
think you've got to figure out your service level, and then you figure your budget to deliver that service level. And if we can do it, then you've got to start saying where we got to cut back to do that. I know that you can't, you know, you're not gonna have an ambulance in Olive Branch and one in New Salem, and I mean, I realize that, but I think you've got to have a starting point somewhere, and if you're not offering the same level at the start, then you're backing up.
And I think that's fair, and I think that's the way we ought to start. That's my opinion, is we ought to start that everybody gets the same level of service. And we'll get to the money later, once we figure out what that is. You know, but I think probably Butch mentioned getting some ideas, and I don't want to sit here today and try to go through all that. We're going to have to break down and get out into some subcommittees and have some folks look at the data and figure all that out from here. So if that pleases the group to do some subcommittees, let's figure out what we see as problem areas, and then we can assign subcommittees to look at those particular. Tim, we're going to look at you to give us some ideas. You've already said, you know, money's one, staffing's one, because or maybe not staffing, but the number of units you got on the road, because you're always getting down in your numbers. So maybe those are things that we can get a subcommittee to start taking a look at, you know, based on the data. we got to have a group go through that, look through response times, where we currently at, because whatever we do can't be worse than what we're doing now.
Correct.
You know, and I think that's what started this whole process of where we are today, is the presentations that we got, you know, in the community meetings, and those things were, you know, 20-minute response times, and we just showed that 90% of the time it was 14, 29, 39. So we can't go to 20 minutes from 14, 29, you know, and expect that to be acceptable. So with that, I would say, what do we see as the problem? You know, what do we see as the problems, and what areas do we need to concentrate in? And Tim, again, like I said, we're going to kind of look to you to name some of these that you see, or Michael, areas that need to be addressed, so that we can get to the root cause of the problems that, you know, you need addressed to get you what you need to do whatever this level of service is. And I think, you know, what's the industry standard right now? What's the industry standard for response times?
Well, the state of North Carolina, I was at the North Carolina EMS meeting on Tuesday in Greensboro, and they divide this into urban, suburban, rural,
Right.
and then they had the state, you know, averages.
Okay.
And I can't give you the exact number because I don't have that information in front of me, but it was right around the same 15-minute times, depending on where you were. I mean, the level of service was obviously different in those three categories. If you live, you know, urban, suburban, rural, there were different goals and averages statewide. So to have one countywide average would be a little different than the way the state office of EMS looks at pre-hospital care.
And is that, you're saying averages? Are they averages or are they fractiles?
They did say they used that same 90%, 90.
So they're fractile.
Yeah, they did.
And,
They didn't use the word fractile, but they said 90.
90%.
Yeah, so that's what they were leaning towards.
I think, you know, looking at it, and I agree with Commissioner Helms, kind of the discussion, Chief and I were talking, it's a chicken and egg argument. I think setting the benchmarks and determining that, I think you took the two approaches. I think you look at the data, kind of determine where we are, but I think one of the big things the committee needs to do is determine that suburban, urban, and rural levels of service we need. And then I think it's largely on
you guys do.
Mike and EMS folks to say, if these are the standards,
Yeah.
and we want these standards in these parts of the county, what then is your, you know, what's your proposal then for meeting those standards and how those work?
What do you need?
What do you need?
Right.
And that's what I'm saying.
That's right, it's not a budget issue until I know what you need.
Yeah.
And then costing it it's a math equation at that point. So I think, you know, working largely, the big part of the work is to determine what the standard or response that we need is across the county. And, I mean, that's how I see it. I could be way simplifying it, but
I
that's.
think we definitely bring forth a proposal that addresses the concerns. I've talked to many of the fire chiefs and, of course, Commissioner Helms, and understand the concerns with the previous model. And I think it would quite honestly mean we'd have to add some more staff to backfill. The biggest concern is when we have ambulances out of the county and then we start moving from some of these areas. You know, that's where we get into the issues with response time. So if we're, you know, able to add some additional ambulances where we can backfill so we can assure that those areas are covered, I mean, I think we could bring forth a model that would address a majority of the issues that have been brought up, and perhaps as we, you know, develop that model, I'd love to have some of the fire chiefs to make sure, all right, these are the three issues we understand. I want to make sure this model addresses those three issues, but I mean, I think we could bring back a model fairly soon on that.
So what I'm hearing is we just need to establish what the metrics are going to be.
Correct.
Well, first, we need to establish what the metrics are now, and everybody off the same piece of data, and everybody under the same understanding of what response times are, either from the call to arrive, or dispatch to arrive, or how we're going to do that. So we need to establish some metrics, and through that metrics, we'll give that to you guys, and you guys say, here's what we need to do this.
Correct.
Is that fair?
Perhaps one of the things we could do, and I don't know if we can achieve it because I don't know what the model's going to be, but Commissioner Helms, do you feel comfortable with the the performance standards as far as, and everyone else has seen the contract, the response times that were in the proposed contract.
Well, the proposed, like Johnny said, the proposed are more than what we're doing today.
I don't think the
Well,
latest.
859, help me.
I don't think the
859.
latest edition was.
Well, I think that's one of the things we need to set. I think we need to have several committees because, one, we have to have one that looks at the model.
That was the first one.
What model? Now, even though we have a model, there are ancillary things that control you being able to drive that model. Example, do you take grandma to the doctor when you're low on ambulances? You know, so somebody that looks, you know, a group that looks at those ancillary things, you know, how do we deal with schools, with the football games? How do we deal with the IFTs? You know, in the previous document, we said 5. You don't go below 5. You know, it really concerned me when I go into the comm center and find out we got 1 available ambulance in the county. I know it concerns you because you're trying to manage it. So how do we prevent that? And I realize that it may be additional ambulances. And I'll tell you, you know, we talked about software a while ago.
Correct.
And I know I've talked to our subject matter experts and the software we have, we need to enhance some, but software will functionally provide the data we need. So do I need to go spend the money on fancy software with dashboards that are easy to read, or do I spend it on resources to give you the availability to the staffing of the ambulance? And that's part of what the committees are going to need to do. And they're going to feed to one another.
And when you say that, and, you know, when I vision resources, I look at personnel, ambulance equipment, and also software. I have to look at all those resources because I have to do something that we can operate at a proficient level with those standards.
Right.
You know, and so that's, and it would be that I'm placing on my operations supervisor running a shift. It's like, you know, if you're falling into a situation that you're getting low on ambulances, you're going to have to make this decision. I've got to give him the tools to do that.
Right, and that's what we want to do.
Yeah.
I think that's what this group wants to do, is give you the tools to do whatever this metric is that we establish. What it was 90th percentile for priority 1, which is in our case a code 3. Year 1 was 1159, year 2 was 1159, year 3 was 1059. And they have it broken down here by the zones that they established. I think one of the other things that we need to do when we're looking at these metrics and priority 2 and priority 1 calls, they also need to have some type of metric assigned to them. You know, and let me explain that. A priority 3 is emergency traffic, or a code 3 is emergency traffic. A code 2 is routine without delay. That means, but you don't finish eating lunch before you go right then. A code 1 is usually,
It's usually a scheduled trip.
but most of the time it would be a scheduled doctor's appointment or something like that from a nursing home. So that's the level of responses. So priority 2 in the urban was 1359 down to 1159 over a 3-year period. And same thing, priority 3s, or priority 1 in our case, 1659 down to 1459. So we need to establish those. One of the things Mike was talking about, the contract, one of the things that did bother me in the contract is we broke the county out into 5 zones. And out of those 5 zones, we wrote into the performance standards or the performance measures in the contract that over a 3-month period, if there wasn't 100 calls in that zone, they did not have to meet the performance standards. Well, I'm not sure that I like that. You know, I like, if we're going to say we're going to try to provide this service and we're going to look at it from a county-wide standpoint, then that's what we need to do. If it's 100 calls or 75 calls and 200 calls, we need to try to make those work. And I think that was one of the questions that was brought up in the chief's meeting with them for the deployment model. You know, if you look at and Larry, I know I had asked him to do a map that showed the calls. if we looked at that map, and there's one in that presentation that we got, the fire chief's got, but you have to have a magnifying glass to read it on there. If you look at that, and Tim, maybe you can speak to this off the top of your head, or Larry, like 85% of the calls, are, as best I can read that little map, are right down the 74 corridor. So
It's a quarter.
yeah, so basically, when you look at that, then that would wipe out pretty much the rest of the county. They wouldn't have to meet any of these performance standards. If you looked at the call volume and the location of the calls. And so, if we're gonna talk about that, that's one of the things that I wanna make sure that we address, is that 100 call in a 3-month period. We would like to see numbers on everything.
Correct. And I think and I, you know, there's no problem there. I think with what they were talking about in the 100 call, they wanted to use that benchmark of 100 calls so we can go back and look at how we're doing. It's not that we would never look at that. It's just when we get to 100 calls instead of a quarter, we might not can get in that zone 100 calls in that quarter. It might take us 3.5 months to get to those 100 calls, and that's when we would look at that. But you know, I that's the way I
think for most of those areas, there's about 4 months or so.
Yeah,
Figured
yeah.
to hit 100.
And we figured that up too, and when we figured that up, and the way it was written in the contract is, these response times didn't apply in those zones. If there was not 100 calls in 3 months, they didn't apply. Is that what y'all read? Yes.
Tim, is that the map that you had up there, the squares?
Yes.
And each square would have to have 100 calls? Is that what
No,
you're saying?
no,
Okay,
there's a map with
I'm gonna say
5 zones.
I got it.
Yeah, 74 corridors like one zone. Tim, is that right? It was kind of one zone, and there was some other zones out, you know, kind of off of that.
Correct.
And that's the map I'm talking about.
What you're saying is it was 100 sample size to determine if you're in 90th percentile versus taking that off of 10 calls in the 3-month period. You would just make that determination at the 100.
Yeah.
At the 100th call, you would determine the percentile versus saying, because what Johnny I think is saying is the standards just don't apply at all. But what you're saying is they do apply, they just apply at a measurement point of 100 calls versus 3 months.
They go into all, so really after, if you look at year-to-date, you're looking at annual performance, right around month 4, all that information would fall in. But I think.
Yeah, we
I mean, that seems like
that.
an easy.
I don't think this is a.
Yeah, but what we want to do is, we want to set these metrics up for everybody to start with, and see what we can do from there. So with that, we need a subcommittee to go ahead and start looking at where we are currently. And, you know, I guess we need to look at what the industry standard is. So we need somebody to take a look at the metrics, to, you know, what we're going to measure in the future, and take a look to see how that's going to play out. I would entertain anybody who wants to serve on the current data. One of you two guys. One of you two. Okay. You want to do the current?
Yeah.
Bill? Okay. Okay, so current data is going to be Billy, Chief Canuck, Joey Hendricks. How many do y'all need?
I think Larry should be in that group.
Yeah, Larry will be in there. And then Larry, you'll use Sharon and Gary both in your processes, right?
So do the work.
Yeah. So he'll use both of them. Michael, do you or Alicia want to do that, or y'all both want to be on the future thing? Y'all
We'll
good
be
with
with confidence in Joey.
Okay, good.
And I think we'll
Y'all work together.
just all sort of
Work together.
migrate across committees. So yeah, sure, I can do that.
Okay? Is that good? Now, for the future metrics and where we're trying to go, Rob, you want to work on that, I guess Tim, Alicia Campbell. You want on that? Yeah. And Curtis, I think you should probably work on that committee as well. Now, anybody else? Sheriff, you want to serve on that?
I will.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
will.
Okay. And what I'll tell you guys is, we're gonna have a meeting next week. So we wanna have some stuff back next week. We're at the 5-week mark. So, you know, I know this is gonna take a lot of time and commitment from everybody here, but I definitely believe it's doable. You know, we can come up with what you guys need to go to work. So, hopefully we'll do that. Now, is there any other questions or discussion on the problem areas, what we see? You know, of course, like I said, we know that you have, you know, number of units you can get on the road. We understand that, but that'll all play into what these numbers show us, and then what you say you need to reduce that.
I think the fact is, if we can get the metrics of, this is what we want to see in response times in all of these areas, and if they're different, that's fine. But if you give us what this committee, I'm confident, you give us what, and we can go back and go.
Yeah. And I want to say to the metrics committee, and I don't remember who all that was, but one thing I do want to say is that we need to look at other things besides simply response time.
Okay.
You know, there are other things that we should be measuring, you know, in this performance, in the performance measures. You know, we ought to be looking at the level of care. We ought to be looking at retention of employees and things like that. Now, we're not going to pretend to tell you how to do that, but those are things that we should, from the county standpoint, we should get in that monthly report when it comes back to the county. We should get those stats in there too, you know, because that's going to, you know, that kind of gives the county an idea of how things are going, what the temperature is over there, things that we've never done before. And, you know, so I think those are things that metrics committee ought to also take a look at, or where do we want to set those things at? You know, and so Michael, Alicia would be good with all of that stuff. You know, kind of helping guide through retention, and Tim, you guys will work through level of care and you know, performance measures that y'all look at, because, you know, I don't pretend to know what, you know, those performance measures that once you arrive on scene, what you're looking for, time on scene, time at the hospital, you know all that. So we should look at all of that data, because that tells us what the health of the system is. And I think we should have metrics to measure all of those things.
And we're not married to the 5-zone concept, right?
No, we're not.
Okay, just to be.
You know,
And the future committee will address that,
what's that?
that if we have to have an alternative to the 5-zone concept.
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to participate in that.
Okay.
Don't you think, because we're on the five-week time frame, if we need additional committees beyond those two,
Yeah.
we work and we'll probably go ahead and talk about this.
Yes. Okay. And like what Richard was talking about, go ahead and explain what you're talking about, the future not being married to the 5 zones, and
Well,
what you see there.
It's, and I have seen some examples, and I went and visited another county that runs a hybrid model with dynamics. And frankly, in talking with some of your supervisors, y'all been doing a lot of dynamics from the get-go. But I think we need to look if maybe we need to have, I don't want to call it zones, but maybe we need to have a concept of stations or zones, but nothing's off the board right now to find out what's the best model. You know, it concerns me when we talk about 85% of the call volumes along the corridor, but you know, that's only 50% of the county. And what we have to make sure that we've got covered is the other 50% of the county too. So I think that's gonna be a challenge that we have to, I call it, have to ensure that we've got the human factor, that we've got our citizens protected. And it may not be the absolute most proficient way, but we've got to protect those citizens. And I think that's what you were alluding to, Sheriff.
I agree.
And so it's,
But don't you think the performance metric group, if you establish a metric for, let's say, 3 zones, then don't you think that the performance metric group would encompass how to achieve that? Because I kind of see them, they're kind of married together.
well,
You're setting a performance
I
standard.
would probably agree that you could do it all at one time.
I think you have to. Because if you're setting performance standards, you're setting it for the entire county, and they have to figure out that committee, how are they going to divide up the county, whatever way.
And I think that's fair, whether they do it based on population per square mile or how they do it, based on those numbers or what they're, I know Dr. Rosanova just spoke about the conference and how they broke it down at the state level. And maybe that's what we can do. We could go out there and just grab that. But I think the metrics committee would do that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think in additional groups, we probably need to take a look at the technology, a technology group as well, to make recommendations of what they need to do better AVL or whatever we need to do. This, you know, there was some technology, some software and whatnot in part of that contract, and you know, we need to take a look at what that is and if those are recommendations that they feel like they need, you know. So, so let's go ahead and establish that group as well.
Myself, Gary.
Okay, Larry and Gary. That sounds like a comedy show. Larry and Gary. I'll help. Tim.
I'll be there.
Tim Adams. And Butch, I'm sorry, did you want to be on that metrics committee to establish those responses and things? I think that would be a really good spot for you
I can.
so you'll go on that metrics committee. Laura, did you get that? I'm sorry. Changing it on. Is that everybody signed? Is that me, right?
no, wait a minute.
Yeah, Curtis is in.
Is it?
Curtis is in. He's on the
That's right, he
metrics.
is on that.
Let's place Greg. We've got to have a task for him to do. So let's place
I thought you were
Greg on
working
the technology also.
Okay, so Greg will be on technology. Greg Coward.
I'll be floating.
Okay.
To ensure everybody has a job, because I think we'll do a finance, I think we should do a finance committee, but I think it probably is me and Mike and.
And probably until we develop the model, so
Till
we have to
the
get the
rest of
performance
that, that's gonna
standards,
sit back.
and we can develop the model off the performance standards, and then we'll have to cost it out.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you the question, do you need to have a committee, or that's just based on
That's part of the
assignments
negotiation, I
that
would
you- that
think,
you
right?
do?
To me, it's
It's
kind
not
of
a negotiation.
it's a committee of 2.
Yeah,
Well,
well, there's no budget, so there's really no negotiation.
Yeah.
It's just, this is how much it's gonna cost, and I think it is important when you look, because this is vastly different than the previous proposal, where there was a 3-year budget. Any performance standards is gonna, just be, there's gonna be a big asterisk next to it based on county funding, because each year we'll have to
Sure.
go back to the county to get the funding.
Sure.
And I need to remind you that each one of these committees, you have to give a 48-hour notice for a special meeting. And that, like I said, Lynn West is willing to do that for you. And I see that, looking at the future metrics, you're not gonna do one meeting and come up with a solution. So there'll be multiple meetings, but you have to keep in mind that, any committee we set has to go through this process.
So probably what we need to do is establish who's going to be the chair of each one of those committees so that you can get with Lynn instead of, so the current data, who wants to chair that?
Bill.
Okay, so Billy Knupp will be the chair of the current data. And, you know, ideally, we'll like to get back the maps and that kind of stuff, and Jeff's folks over at GIS are committed to helping with all that. The Future Metrics Committee, which is Rob, Alicia, Curtis, Don, Tim Adams, Sheriff Kathy, and Richard Hams. So we need to get a chairperson out of that group. Who wants to volunteer to do that? Basically, you'll be setting the meetings and
I think you also should share Commissioner Thomas.
yeah, I forgot about him.
I talked to Jonathan about that, and he said he would float,
Okay.
and, because of his work
Ben's
schedule.
actually gonna take that committee.
Say that again.
Ben's gonna be on that committee instead of me.
Are you recommending for the chairman?
No. I better not do that.
I think Ben would be a great chair.
That's what I just heard. Thank you, Sheriff.
Are you volunteering him?
Ben Bailey will be the chairman of the Future Matrix Committee.
Would it be appropriate if one of the EMS teammates led that?
Could be. If they want to.
Rick?
I'll be on that one.
I think that's just hearing, that's not being on that.
Yeah. it's a little different.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You want it?
I'll do that.
Okay.
I can do that, because I can pull Dale from that.
Can I just ask a fundamental question? Not that I don't want to disagree with Mike, but I do. Being as the service provider in the EMS group, from a county perspective, then proposing this metric standard by which they'll be measured by, ultimately a contract, seems to me it might be a little bit of a conflict.
That's why I said, would it be appropriate?
I think it's appropriate to have them involved, absolutely, but to chair the committee and making final recommendations, I don't think, I kind of see that as a conflict.
Okay.
Sorry.
And I don't have a
Not
problem
that
with
they could be
that. That's fine.
independent, I'm not suggesting.
Yeah,
they
no,
all should be,
that I
just
don't have a problem with
optically, I think
that.
you have to cover it.
Second Don.
No, I'm gonna do it.
Ben.
He got it.
Support it, absolutely.
Yeah, I think Ben would do good at that. He's,
Ben's gonna be the chairman of the Future
Yeah.
Metrics. I like it. All right?
thank you, Sheriff.
I think we need to also, as we elect these, have to go back to that legalese that says we need to authorize them to call meetings,
Okay.
so that.
How do we do that? Make a motion? I make a motion, we do that.
All in favor of allowing them to set their meetings? Unanimous.
Technology. The technology group, we need a chairperson for that. That could be you, Greg.
I nominate Larry. Oh, that sounds nice to you.
And I think we're gonna, you know, there's a lot of technology out there, and I think what's compatible with what we're doing, and Larry definitely needs to.
I totally agree.
Larry Brinker, technology, and funding and all of that stuff we'll get to, yeah. So I think that's the fair thing. But you're on the matrix committee, right? Okay. 48 hours, I would encourage you to get with your group today and look at your schedules and try to figure out something. What's today, Thursday? Maybe Saturday or Monday that you can get together.
Well, even the committees, you have to take notes. If you vote on an issue, it has to be documented in your minutes. If you just have discussion, you can just label it as we discussed technology. But, you know,
Lynn will explain that to.
Action taken should be recorded.
Yeah,
action taken has to be recorded.
and Lynn will take care of that, right?
Yeah, and if you decide, like for this committee, if we decide to do regular meetings, then you don't have to give the continuing notices. But a special meeting requires, for example, for this meeting, Tuesday morning before 9, the notice had to go out to allow for the 48 hour. So if you're going to have, even in your committees, if you want to say we want to meet every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 o'clock, you can do that one time, and then you don't have to keep doing it 48 hours. So just be conscious of that. We're probably gonna have to, if the group's gonna get together and decide which one, we'll probably need to do it here while we're being videotaped and recorded. Get in your group and decide when your next meeting's gonna be, when your first work session's gonna be, so that we adhere to all of it. I spent a good bit of time with our attorney yesterday to make sure that we do this correctly.
When will this committee meet next?
We're working on that now.
Where's Ben so he can call him?
The sheriff will take care of that.
I'm fixing to call his next meeting for him.
Yeah, the sheriff will take care of that. One thing that Jeff just brought to my attention is you'll have to meet Monday through Friday or it's because every meeting, even the subcommittees, have to be accessible to the public. So if you're gonna meet in this building, you know, I guess you can meet in the evenings.
Yeah, if you'll let us know, and you can coordinate that with Lynn, and Lynn can coordinate with facilities probably. This building's not open except during business hours. It can be in another location, it just has to be accessible to the public. So, you know, it kind of rules out necessarily restaurants and, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, maybe the
The
school
general meeting
over here
places.
or something like that, or a fire station.
There's 3 rooms that was suggested to me. This one, there's one that the commissioners meet that behind the commission chambers, and then there's one down on the ground level floor. So there's multiple rooms that we can schedule. Lynn will take care of that too, if you'll just tell her when, and she can help schedule those.
What kind of time frame do you guys that are on these committees feel like you need? A week for us to get back together and you to have something for us
Think
to
it
look
would
at?
be a good start.
You need
So
at
next
least that-
Friday,
at least that much.
we got it. Larry's got it. Bam, he's got that for you. Sorry.
I would think they need at least meet twice.
Okay.
I'm not on the committees, but one, to get a game plan, and 2, the second meeting, really make decisions
Okay.
before they come back.
So how long before this group needs to?
I think we need to meet
Need to
weekly
get back.
to
I'm
make sure
checking
we're
the
on
bill
target.
right now.
How about, next Friday? Next Friday work? That's, what's that, 17th?
17th.
Morning or, what's wrong, Tim? Huh?
Annual vacation, but
Oh,
Well, today's my birthday.
anniversary
so-
week vacation, so.
Joey.
So next Friday, what works best for everybody, morning or afternoon?
Morning.
So if we put out a notice for a meeting next Friday morning at 9 o'clock in this room, okay?
And can our committees meet before that, kind of,
Oh, yeah.
we can do
We'll
it.
have to, yeah.
I think we need to meet
And
minimum once, if not 2, twice, and at least we can give an update. Because if you look at the subject matters, they're all so interconnected that feedback among the committees is going to be critical.
Is there every issue that we can meet every Thursday at 9? Every week, every Thursday at 9 o'clock? You know, and that way you can set it at one time, like we were talking about. You can set that.
Yeah, but I don't want to do that because we may need to change the day or something 3 weeks from now, and then it's a whole other process for cancellation and,
It's just better for me to,
yeah.
schedule.
We'll
You know?
probably try to, yeah, it's better for me too, but I don't want to get into having to change stuff. So maybe what would be best is if we just did it a week in advance.
If you do that, then that'd give you committees at least 2 meetings before this meeting, which would work out well.
And if you're gonna have a quorum, you can dial in, we can set up a phone.
Okay.
You can dial in, you just can't vote. So if we have a quorum of this committee anyway, if you're gonna be out of time, if you're not here. Right. So, well, if it's an excused absence, it's not. If it's an unexcused absence, it's an affirmative vote. So, but if you're not gonna vote, or the committee's not gonna take action, it's a report out meeting, then we can set up a call bridge, and you can dial in, listen to the meeting and participate, and then go back to doing whatever. So if you let us know, we can accommodate. Okay. To some degree.
17th at 9 o'clock, so.
That's this group.
Yeah, for this group.
That's
Matrix Committee, you gonna meet Monday?
fine with me.
That's the 13th.
That's Monday.
Future metrics.
Where and when?
Here.
Here.
9 o'clock?
Whatever time y'all,
Well, 9 o'clock.
Only thing we may have to change, we'll have to talk to Lynn, and check the availability of this room.
well, if we have to move,
We can be in the building.
we'll be in the building.
We can probably.
Okay, you guys work all that out and get your notices to Lynn. Actually, if you're chairing, you probably need to sit with Lynn. Let her explain all that to you. Is anybody else got anything for the good of the group?
That's Monday the 13th, right, Sheriff?
Yep.
Our meeting is a week from today.
17th, Friday.
Okay.
Friday the 17th at 9 a.m.
Total committee.
Anybody else got anything? If not, I would entertain a motion that we,
Excuse me, one more thing. As far as agendas and all of those, would those be mailed out prior to?
yes,
If we have that?
yeah,
Okay, all right.
I will do my best to do that.
Okay.
John asked me, do we need to send a piece of paper around for
Me
contact?
too. Me too. Yeah, me too, Joey, so.
Now, what time, Monday the 13th, what time? 9 o'clock? I'll contact Lynn and have her send out a special notice that we'll have the 48 hours. Jeff, can you tell me, is it 48 hours a weekday or is it just 48 hours?
I think it's just 48 hours, but that's a Jeff good question.
I do, yeah,
You have to have 48 hours.
and I got it for everybody.
Maybe something we share with the group.
48 hours, just 48 hours.
Yeah, if it's a Monday meeting and you don't get that notice posted,
If we do that today,
courthouse
we'll
has to
meet.
be open where you post these things. I don't know, would you have to post these things? On the posting boards?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If the courthouse is closed for 48 hours prior to a meeting that notice being posted for 48 hours, it has to be posted on the outside.
Other.
Would you like the agenda to try to be posted at 48 hours too? Would that
You don't have to do the agenda.
We don't have to do the agenda, but if we can receive the agenda, yeah, we can,
That'd be helpful.
we can disperse it out.
Did anyone say the other, now we got the metrics committee to set
9
that.
a.m.
Any
Monday.
other set
Future
date that
metric
we need to
committee.
post?
I just sent to work.
In your current day, y'all gonna get together.
I said your meeting is at 9 a.m. Monday on the matrix committee, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Is there anything else? If not, we're going to adjourn this meeting, so y'all can work out your schedules.
Tuesday, Thursday, then we'll do the technical.
Tuesdays and
Is
Thursdays.
there a current matrix now?
Basically, that map that we
Yeah.
had up there.
Yes.
Yeah,
We'll start from there.
yeah.
Folks, I apologize, I got.
Okay.
Emergency calls.
Technology, you got
Larry,
Tuesday and
so we're
Thursday,
adjourned.
9 o'clock.
Yes, I'm waiting on one.
Move for adjournment.